Hi, I'm Maggie McGrath, Senior Editor at Forbes, and today we're going to be talking about some corporate trends and what's behind them and the terms that we use to describe them. And I'm thrilled to welcome to our virtual studio Rita Ernst. She's an organizational psychologist who has some really good insight on quiet quitting, quiet hiring, quiet firing, and why some of these terms might just be complete baloney.
I love that is the intro, Maggie. Thank you. Yes. Are these things real? That is a wonderful question to be asking.
I mean, and you and I have spoken before, and I said to you before, I got an email and it used the term quiet hiring. And I thought, what in the world is that? And also, my second thought was that does not sound good. But let's start with that first question. What is quiet hiring?
So quiet hiring, when it was originally introduced, was introduced by a business consultant that was working inside of an organization. And what they were talking about, this organization was making some key pivots, had some new positions that they needed to fill. You know, the marketplace has been crazy, right? It's been really difficult to find talent in the marketplace and attract them into the workplace. And so the idea was, maybe we should be looking for the best and the brightest inside of our own doors, the people that already know us, that have all the insider view, and bring those people into these opportunities. Maybe it's a growth opportunity for them. It's a place to shift our talent a little bit. And oh, by the way, if you're going to be replacing a technology or phasing out of some area of your business, that's fewer positions that you then have to pay all those termination expenses to when you right size or downsize your organization.
It solves a need right now for sure. It is a weird job market. I've actually heard economists kind of say it is a weird economy right now. We see low levels of unemployment, and yet we also see a lot of headlines about corporate layoffs. So some employers might be in this position that you described. They have an open position. They can't get anyone in, so they might as well promote or hire from within. But the reason I had a negative reaction the first time I heard this term is it sounds to me like something that's been happening for years, which is a friend will call me and be like, I got a promotion. And I'll say, congratulations. And they'll say, oh, not in title and not in salary, just in what I'm doing. More was put on my plate. Are companies at risk of falling into that trap of just loading their best and their brightest with more responsibilities and without appropriate compensation?
There's absolutely a wrong way to do that, and you just named it. And it is important, and I come from a background in human resources, but it is important to recognize roles and responsibilities, to value them appropriately in the marketplace, and to make sure that you are compensating and total rewarding your talent in those positions appropriately if you want to hold on to them, and not have them learn from you and then get stolen away to take all that knowledge and use it somewhere else. So if people... And let me just agree with you a second on what you said. Like I had the exact same sort of negative feeling around quiet hiring, because I really thought that that's what they were going to be alluding to when I first heard the term, and I looked it up. I thought they were going to be talking about this idea of promoting people and not giving them the appropriate compensation and recognition and title and things to go with it, which was not the original person's definition that she provided. So I kind of feel like she was just riding the quiet trend. We had quiet quitting, and then we had quiet firing, and so it's kind of a buzzy thing to have that quiet in front of it. But in those first two examples, there was sort of this hidden agenda element. So it's like, well, what's the hidden agenda here? That's what I was looking for. That's what I was listening for. And anytime there's a hidden agenda, that usually means something good is not going on. But her pure intention was really to do it right, to look and value people appropriately as you're moving them in. But it is not a new trend for businesses to give new responsibilities, to load on the work. I actually had two coaching clients this in the past year that happen to be females. I think women have suffered this a lot, who were clearly, when I put on my HR hat, sitting in roles that were 1 and 2 levels beyond the title that they were given and the compensation that they were given, because they had grown. They had sort of stepped in and grown their role and grown their contribution and taken on all of these things. And then all of a sudden they're sort of tapping their foot saying, well, but wait, when is the title? When is the, and so when you do that, I can tell you, because I'm coaching people in that space, you are losing their engagement. You are losing their trust. You are losing their commitment. You are having them question whether or not this is a company that is continuing to be right for them. So it is very important that when you're doing this, moving around, the other thing that we talked about earlier that I think is so important, Maggie, is it also matters whether or not the person wants to make that move. If you're just forcing people, then you are basically creating a big exit sign for them. Mm-hmm. So it is extremely important that you are having conversation and saying, this is an opportunity. This is why I think this would be valuable to you. How do you feel about doing that kind of work? How do you feel about this? Does this feel like an opportunity to you? Are you interested in doing this? If quiet hiring is going behind the scenes and mapping people into jobs and then walking in and saying, guess what? This isn't your job anymore. We're going to move you over here and do this, and this is your new job. I mean, you may have the right to do that as a organization, but you are not going to be bringing the hearts and minds. You're just going to get the physical show up in that position.
And that can lead, in my opinion, back to the term that kicked all of this off, which was quiet quitting, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
Can we talk about, you mentioned that a corporate consultant came up with was jumping on the quiet trend, but can we rewind? Why is everything quiet now? Where did this start for those who are just picking up the thread now?
So the first time that I saw the terminology emerge, it was the quiet quitting was the first to come out. And this was really a grassroots phenomenon. These were typically younger workers who were going onto their TikTok or their Instagram stories, and they were sharing this idea that they no longer felt the value equation was right, that they were taking on too much for what they were receiving back from the organization, and that they were setting a boundary and saying, I'm just not going to do it anymore. I'm just not going to keep going at this pace. And if I do, I'm going to burn out. And I have a right to just sort of say, no, thank you, and not take on that extra assignment, not work those extra hours. I'm sorry, I have a commitment. I can't stay, which is something as a Gen Xer, that was part of what differentiated us when we came into the workforce. And so it's just their language. It's the new generation's language for something that, again, is not a new phenomenon at all in business, but it's their way of languaging their experience. And because it was a hashtag, of course, it picked up, and then people start using that hashtag. So the very first evidence that I've seen of the quiet trend really came from workers, not from anywhere else. And then the next one that came behind that was the quiet firing conversation. And the first place that I heard that from is a thought leader in the culture space. And she was actually on like CNBC or one of those news media shows talking about the quiet quitting trend. And she brought up quiet firing. And so maybe we should define that to help people out. So quiet firing is when you, as a manager of people, make a determination that somebody has sort of hit their ceiling. You are happy to have them continue. You love their work, but in terms of their aspirations to move forward, to advance, you're not necessarily looking at them when those opportunities are coming forward.
It seems so cowardly.
Yes, in many ways that it is. And, I'll go back to my HR experience, in my OD experience. When you want to build a thriving culture, you have ongoing conversations to come together in mutual understanding about what your employees are looking for and what you have to offer. And if you're having those as a normal part of your performance connection with an employee, and they're giving you an aspiration, and you might have to say, I understand why you're enticed by that. I have to be frank with you, that's probably not going to happen here. And sometimes the right thing to do, they may need to leave. I mean, if you work in a really big organization, it might be in another channel of that company where you could find that opportunity. That wouldn't necessarily mean leaving. Sometimes it may mean leaving that organization altogether. But if you are really working that correctly as a manager, you have plenty of time to put all the right pieces in place and allow that person to leave without creating this big hole and problem for yourself. But you're right, it's cowardly. Most managers are not given enough training and support and guidance to really confidently step through that process.
So as a journalist and a writer, I believe in the power of words. I think it's often good to have words to describe phenomenon. And I find it interesting that this started, quiet quitting was grassroots, and then the corporate consultants kind of took that over with the quiet firing and the quiet hiring. I'm of two minds here, and I'm curious to hear what you think. Is it good that we're taking these terms and co-opting them from a grassroots movement or a grassroots social movement? Or are we normalizing the potential downside of quiet? I would argue that the quiet firing is not something we want to normalize. I guess what I'm curious about, like, is this conversation going anywhere? Are these terms going anywhere?
To me, at the moment, it feels a little sensationalized. And I think that's a very dangerous place, because I think in that sensational media, what we tend to use is the leverage of pitting one against another, right? So, in storytelling, there has to be the enemy and there has to be the virtuous person, right? That's what makes good storytelling. That's why we tune in and watch on Netflix or whatever. And so there's that storytelling element that I feel like happens when it gets captured by the media. And that's dangerous, because we cannot create healthy workplaces when we have us versus them mentality happening. Our thoughts precede our behavior. So if we're thinking that person is against me, then we're going to behave in defensive ways, right? And so we're not going to come together in a collegial way to really make the productivity happen that we want to make happen. We're going to start to see decline because of that. So I think that is the real danger of having it trend and really go viral, which is what it did. And the other thing that happens is it's the telephone game that we learned years and years ago as young people. What the original definition of quiet hiring was when that management consultant coined it, and then how it gets warped and evolved as other people begin to use it. You can end up in a completely different place. You can totally lose the thread of the idea, and it can become something much more sinister than what was intended in most cases, because we tend to sensationalize the negative news, right? So the more negative spin, the more people pay attention. I mean, when we learn that about the social media algorithms, right? This is in our DNA. This is part of our psychology, our biology. So we tend to emphasize that. And I think that is very dangerous for trying to build happy, productive cultures and workplaces that really allow people to thrive and bring their full potential. I think you're setting the precedence when you're in those conversations from that us versus them place of seeding toxic cultures.
I mean, to your point about the hidden motive, from the beginning, quiet quitting, I'm pulling back from my position and I'm not going to do more than what's asked of me. There is, in each of these, I think when there are hidden motives and hidden moments, I guess, that feels dangerous. But we are in an uncertain economic time. Also, the number of headlines I've seen recently, is a recession coming? Are we already in a recession? I alluded to the corporate layoffs we've seen in the month of January. It is, I think, feeling precarious for people. So what is your prescription for let's start with the employers who might feel that they need to use these sexy terms to engage with their Gen Z and millennial employees. What would you tell them, knowing the potential downsides, knowing the environment that we're in right now? What's your advice for engaging them in the way that they want to engage their employees?
I think the number one thing that you can do as a manager and a leader is to get curious. Instead of trying to come in with all the answers and prescribe, that's a very old style of management that the new generations do not respond to well. It is time to go on a listening tour, start engaging, asking employees, ask them what they think these terms mean. How do their friends use them? And then start talking about, well, what do we need to do in our team to make it be different? You know, do we have issues with quiet quitting? Is anybody willing to be honest with me about that? I mean, when you say it like that, and then tell me more about that. What is that about? What are we missing? What more do we need? And then when you have that conversation, the most beautiful moment happens, Maggie. You get to invite them to co-create with you the solution. And that's how we solve for employee engagement. All of this conversation about disengagement, the numbers have been historically surprisingly high around disengaged employees. They are at an all-time high currently. And that you've got to find that way to connect. And the way we connect is not in what we say. The way we connect is in conversation.
I so appreciate that, because I think there's a certain degree to which the quiet hiring and quiet firing, and I also saw the term job cuffing a few months ago or weeks ago. It's all a blur. And it feels a little bit like, you know, that meme where it's how you do, fellow kids. That's what that feels like. And that to me creates distance. But the conversation that you just alluded to, that creates collaboration and potentially a better environment. This has been fascinating, but for final thoughts, what are you predicting that we'll see? Is there another term that's going to take the internet by storm next month or the month beyond? Are we going to move into maybe the opposite, like loud firing or loud hiring or noisy quitting?
You know, it's interesting that you asked that question, because if I could wave my magic wand and whisper into people's ears and get them to do anything, I would say, stop being quiet about it. You know, it's not doing yourself a service necessarily to be quiet about this. And your quietness causes you to get out of integrity to what really matters to you. I wrote a whole book about the idea of you have agency and power, and that you have the ability to create workplaces that really fulfill you when you choose to be engaged. But when you get quiet, you're stepping back, you're withholding something. I would love for us to see that shift to happen, and not loud in terms of being attacking, but loud in terms of owning our voice to say what I need, owning our voice to say what is missing for us, owning our voice to offer new things to others. I think that there are more victories that can occur when we can come together and talk out loud and find that shared purpose. You know, it's purpose, meaning, and respect. That's all it takes to have good teamwork. Purpose, meaning, and respect. And if you can stay in those conversations and offer those things, but the pivotal one is respect. And when people get quiet, chances are it's because they're feeling disrespected. And that's a moment when you need to lean in and reach out and work to repair.
All right. So 2023, the year of maybe getting loud about all of this. Rita, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to talk with you.